Hey everybody, and welcome back as we continue to dive in to this long-awaited Dominaria United set. Again, this is a standard set and marks the beginning of the rotation of standard format where we will be seeing Strixhaven, Kaldheim, and the Zendikar Rising set, all being rotated out. So, with the new chapter in standard, it makes sense. This is the 30th anniversary for Magic the Gathering. We are going back to where it started in Dominaria. So, before I get started, I do need some caffeine, and then we'll dive into some green cards. Alright, we'll start with Colossal Growth. Makes sense that for green, we'll see a growth card. For 2 mana, it's an instant. It can be kicked for 1 red. Target creature gets +3/+3 until the end of the turn. If it was kicked, instead, +4/+4 and trample and haste until the end of the turn. 3 mana gives something +4/+4, haste and trample, very strong. Maybe we see this in play for Commander. Certainly, I have to imagine this seeing play in Standard, and most definitely, this is a good limited card to run. Next is Defiler of Vigor, a 5 mana 6/6 Phyrexian worm. Before we get into this, worms were the first thing I got into. I loved the worms before I got into the Eldrazi. They just weren't as exciting to me as the Eldrazi, but they were where I started with Magic the Gathering. So seeing the worm become Phyrexian is amazing. I've not actually seen a Phyrexian worm. I've used, the closest thing I got was the Hulk worm. But that was an artifact creature, and it didn't feel quite like a worm to me because it was mechanical in nature. And seeing an actual worm from this plane, I mean, they were just so powerful. And they really embodied what green is all about. Big things that hit hard, and for the most part, they tended to trample when they came to worms, with exceptions. So in this case, you're getting a 5 mana 6/6 with trample, and as an additional cost to casting a green permanent, you may pay 2 life, and then those spells will cost a green mana less to cast if you paid life that way, and this effect reduces only the amount of green mana that you would pay. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that you control. So yes, this will see play in Commander because that value is tremendous. I believe, though this is expensive, this could see play in Standard as well, because Jetmir is Standard, and that is really strong combo when you're creating, like with Jenny Faye and such, and green's a part of the Cabaret colors. And also, do we see this in Limited? It's expensive as far as cards go, but a 5 mana 6/6 trample, even without the rest of the effects, is worthwhile running in Limited, so I certainly think that we'll see this in Limited format as well. Next we have Herd Migration, a 7 mana sorcery with Domain. You create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control. And for 2 mana, you can discard this and search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle, and gain 3 life. I don't think this really sees a lot of play in Commander. Funny enough, I don't think there's enough value for Commander at the price point. And tutoring specifically for a basic land isn't all that powerful. We have things like Prismatic Vista for that, Myriad Landscape, Expedition, Terramorphic Expanse, and then the Wilds card. So I don't think this will see play in Commander. In Standard, it seems expensive to me, but maybe in Standard, because again, we do have the Triumphs. And then Limited, I have to imagine this is too expensive for Limited, because if you only have one basic land type that you were able to draft effectively, then you're dealing with a 7 mana 3/3 at that point. So I don't think it's as useful for that. Alright, next we have Llanowar Green Widow, which is funny since the Llanowar elves are what I'm used to seeing, and widows are spiders, and so I used to also combo spiders with worms. This is a 3 mana 4/3 spider with reach and trample. It has Domain. For 8 mana, you can return this from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and then it gains, if this permanent would leave the battlefield, you exile it instead of putting it anywhere else, and then the ability does cost a generic mana less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. 3 mana 4/3 reach and trample is already pretty good for the stat line. I think this sees play in Limited. I believe this sees play in Standard, and I think it's even valuable enough with the Domain ability where we might see this in Commander. It's tough to say. Spiders do have a home in the Commander format. So next we have the Llanowar Loam Speaker, a 2 mana 1/3 elf druid that can tap for a mana of any color, or can tap and target land you control, becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until the end of the turn. It's still a land, and you only activate as a sorcery. This is a huge value card. This goes in all of the formats. This absolutely goes in them. So the value is just tremendous. Elves have a lot to when you're creating a new elf card, you're competing a lot of other really good elves, and this one does well at doing that. So next we have the Magnagoth Sentry, a 4-mana 4/4 tree folk with reach. Finally, trees have reach. What? I think this is probably too slow to run in Commander. In Standard, probably still the same. Depending on what the flying does in the format. If there's too much flying, not enough reach. But in Limited, this is a great card. 4-mana 4/4 is about the right stat line, and it coming in with reach is just a little more helpful. Next up with a neshoba Brawler, a 2-mana with 3 for sure toughness, cat warrior with trample. It has domain where its power is equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So at bare minimum is a 2-mana 1/3, making its trample ability fairly useless. So I don't think this is all that great to run in Limited format, but the 3 toughness makes it a good blocker. I think this works okay in Standard because, again, the triomes help with the domain ability. But I think mostly this was probably going to see more play in a Commander deck, and I actually do believe that there's a Commander deck for this card. So, funny enough, I think this will see more Commander play than anything else. But if you have this card in the draft, 3 toughness ain't bad. Next we have Scout the Wilderness for 3 mana. It's a sorcery that can be kicked for 2 mana, 1 generic, 1 white. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. If this spell was kicked, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Wow. 3 mana search for a basic land card is pretty bad. Pretty bad indeed. Maybe this was meant for draft, but that kick ability, 2 mana for 2 1/1s, that is valuable. So I think this sees play in Limited. I don't know if I would ever see this. You have to kick it, which means you can't just pay the 2 mana. You have to pay the 3 original mana as well. So it does force this card to be 5 mana, search for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tab, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. It's not bad ramp. The problem is that you are competing with things like Cultivate and Kodama's Reach right now. And in Commander, those are just way better because they search for 2 basics for 3 mana. One goes on battlefield tap, the other goes in your hand. And so if you also miss your land drop for turn, you can play the land. So I just don't think that this really competes well in Commander. But I think it sees play in Limited. And I feel like this is probably got to be too slow for Standard. But it's not easy to say because it does create 2 bodies. Next we have Slimefoot Survey, a 5 mana sorcery with domain. So in this case, you search the library for up to 2 land cards that each have a basic land type. You put them on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. You look at the top X cards of your library, X being the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Wow, this is a good card for all of the formats. I say that because this can search for triomes. It just requires that you search for 2 lands that each have a basic land type, and the triomes do. So this searches for triomes. And triumph fetches are, I mean, it's hard for this to go well in Commander in decks that run fetch lands right now, but this goes well in a budget Commander deck where you need to fetch for your triomes and you're playing in a more casual pod of players where you don't run fetch lands that tap and sacrifice, pay a life, and search for a card that has a basic land type in it, you know? This card is pretty good for that. And then in addition to that, you're going to scry based on the triomes you pulled. And if you pull 2 triomes with different land types, that means you're getting the 5 max. So you're scrying 5 at that point. So I think this ends up being a pretty good card. Next, we have the Snare Spinner, a 2 mana 1/3 spider with reach. And when this blocks a creature with flying, it gets +2 power, becoming a 3/3 at that point. So I definitely think this sees play in Limited. I don't know if Standard likes spiders all that much, but I will say this is probably cute enough and fun enough to run in Commander for the spider decks I've seen. Next we have the Strength of the Coalition. This is a 1 mana instant, kicks for 3 mana, 2 generic, 1 white. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn, but if it was kicked, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Wow, 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 wow. That last ability, I think, is what makes this really good. 4 mana, give a creature +2/+2, and then everything +1/+1 counter. Yeah. So I believe this sees play in Commander. I believe it sees play in Standard. And in Limited it does, because 1 mana gives something +2/+2 is already good. So I definitely see it in Limited. Next we have Territorial Marrow, a 5 mana elemental with domain, where his power and toughness are both equal to twice the number of basic land types among lands you control, so you could be getting a 5 mana 10/10. Sounds really good. It would be better if this came with Trample. So that makes this card easily blocked. You can chump block with a 1/1. So it's hard for me to see this in play in Commander. There are elemental decks, so this might fit in an elemental deck just because playing elementals makes that deck stronger. But maybe not. It could see play in Standard. Again, with the Triomes, it does make this ability. Domain abilities are a lot stronger with Triomes. And in Limited, probably not. 5 mana, 1/1 or 2/2 is what you're probably looking at in a Limited format. So this is an absolutely terrible card for Limited. Next we have Threats Undetected. So this is a 3 mana sorcery. Search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of them, and you shuffle the chosen cards in your library, and the rest go into your hand. Wow. That's pretty good. I think that goes well in Commander. I think it goes well in Standard. And it goes well in Limited as well. Because you get to fill your hand up with creatures. And they're all theoretically good if you drafted them. So that's really good. Next we have the Vine Shaper Prodigy, which is a 2 mana 2/2 elf druid that can kick for 2 mana as well. 1 generic, 1 blue. When this enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Yeah, I don't think this fits well in Commander because blue doesn't fit well with the elf decks that I've seen. And I think this plays okay. This is good in Limited. And I don't know about Standard, how many elf synergy stuff you want to run, or I don't know. It seems good in Standard though. You do get to look at the top 3 cards, and that's filtering is always important in Standard. Next we have the World Spell. This is a 7 mana saga enchantment with Read Ahead. So these are the 3 chapters. Remember though, with Read Ahead you can start on whatever chapter you want to and then resolve forward. In this case, the first 2 are the same. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. And its final chapter is to put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So this can pull cards that you want into your hand and then just put them on the board. This is a really good card, and I mean, this is a really good card. I mean, I have an Earth Dragon deck. It's full of dragons and powerful enchantments. Oh my gosh. Even lands if you really want to, but eh. Yeah, this is a fantastic card. I hope I pull this. This will see play in Commander. It should see play in Standard. I don't know. I feel like maybe it could be too expensive. And then also in Limited, it's probably too pricey. But if you make it to turn 7, it's not a bad card to play. You're hoping to play creatures on those later turns though, and that is worth me saying. So you may end up doing 7 mana and just put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand on the battlefield. You may just be doing that. All right, finally we have the Yavamaya Iconoclast, a 2 mana 3/2 elf that can kick for red mana. It has trample, and if it enters the battlefield kicked, then it gets +1/+1 in haste until the end of the turn. Yeah, I don't think this is good enough to run in Commander. Again, red is also not a color I see a lot with elves. Standard, probably too slow, but it's really good and Limited. Alright, and that does it for our green cards. So that'll move us on to our multicolored cards. And this is where it gets a bit more exciting, especially because we're going to start with Ajani, the sleeper agent. It was revealed to us that the second planeswalker to be completed is Ajani. So he is a 4 mana, 1 generic, 1 green, 1 Phyrexian green or 1 Phyrexian white, and then 1 white. So he's been completed. What that means is that Phyrexian green / white card, mana value that we're seeing up at the card, in the corner of the card, means that you can pay 2 life points instead of paying green or white. You could alternatively play green or white. You can pay either one. Or you can simply pay 2 life, and that'll also take place of that mana pip. However, if you do that, if you pay 2 life instead, it comes in with 2 fewer loyalty. So instead of 4, it would come in with 2. Originally, however, this card comes in with 4 loyalty, and it has 3 different abilities. The first one is a +1 loyalty, is to reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a creature or a planeswalker, you put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom of your library. Next, its -3 loyalty ability is to distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among up to 3 target creatures. They gain vigilance until the end of the turn. -6, the ultimate, is to get an emblem. The emblem is whenever you cast a creature or a planeswalker spell, target opponent gains 2 poison counters. We haven't seen poison in a long time, but if you get to 10 poison counters, you lose the game. And then they count as counters as well, so they can be proliferated, which is really dangerous in the Commander format. So, will we see this in Commander? Absolutely. This is a nasty card. This is fantastic. We're going to see it in Commander. High power. Do we see this in Standard? I believe we would see it in Standard. I definitely think people would try, but it's tough to say with the colors that's running, but I think that's a good card. Do we see it in Limited? I think we see it in Limited, but mostly because you're going to complete it. I think you're going to pay 2 life points to play him. That way you can get him out in turn 3. So, and then you can immediately +1. You can't do any of the other abilities, but you could at least immediately +1 and go ahead and essentially scry. Alright, next we have the Asteroid, Bearer of Blades, a 4-mana 4/4 human warrior that when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipments you control have equip 1, and vehicles you control have crew 1. So I definitely think we'll see this in Commander. I don't know if we'll see it in Standard, and we will see this in Limited just because 4-mana 4/4 is about the right stat line. Next, vortuck, Bone Rattle, a 6-mana 4/4 troll shaman with domain. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you choose target creature card in your graveyard and return it to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. Otherwise, you put it into your hand. I think maybe we see this in Commander. I think maybe we see it in Standard because Triumphs. And I think it's too expensive to run in Limited. But not a bad card. Next, joyra? Ageless Innovator, a 2-mana 1 blue 1 red 2/3 human artificer. You may tap her and put 2 ingenuity counters on her, and then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, X being the number of ingenuity counters on her. I definitely think we see Commander stuff with her in it, if not her as a Commander. And I think this is a good card for Limited. Tough to say for Standard. I'm not familiar with a lot of artifact synergy that we're going to see, but I think that this card is not bad for what you're getting out of it. 2-mana 2/3 tap and then does things is fun. Next we have Najal, the Storm Runner, a 5-mana 2 generic 2 blue 1 red 5/4 Efreet Wizard. So you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash, and then whenever this attacks, you may pay 2 generic mana. And if you do that, the next instant or sorcery spell that you cast, you copy. And as long as it's on the same turn. And you may choose new target for the copy. This is a great card for Izzet. We see it in Commander, I think. It may be too slow for Standard. And for Limited, I don't know. I think people try it in Limited. I think you draft it and some people are going to try. But it's a 5-mana 5/4. It's really hard to say. Next is Namita, Primeval Warden, a 4-mana 3/4 tree folk with reach. Oh yay, another reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, you exile it instead, and when you do, you create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. For a green mana, you sacrifice one of those saplings, and then she gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Or you may pay 2 mana, sacrifice 2 saplings, and you get to draw a card. It's not bad. I think that she's a pretty interesting card, and I think she could be her own Commander. I don't know. She's cheap enough. She fits the right mana cost of 4 mana. And she has a decent enough effect that you could build a deck around it. Could be a 2-color deck. Yeah, I think this could be a Commander. I think this goes in Commander. Standard, I'm not really sure. Card draw is important though, right? For Standard, maybe it goes into Standard decks. And as for Limited, yeah, I definitely think this goes in Limited. Forcing your opponent not to have a graveyard is always fun. Alright, next up. Queen Eleanor of Rulik, a 3-mana 1 green 2 white elf noble. Her power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control, and if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature token are created instead. This definitely fits into Commander easily. Standard probably with Jenny Faye as a card. Fits pretty well. And fits the Cabaret colors. And then in limited, that's hard to say, but probably you try it in limited as well. Next up we have Raph Weatherlight Stalwart. A 2-mana 1 white 1 blue 1/3 human wizard that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control, and if you do, you draw a card. For 5 mana 2 generic 3 white, creatures you control get +1/+1 and vigilance until the end of the turn. That's a great card. I see this going Commander. I think it's enough value to go in Standard, and in Limited, it's harder to run this in Limited, but I think you try. Next we have Rulik Mons, Warden Chief. 4 mana, 1 generic, 1 red, 2 green, 3/3 goblin with menace, and whenever it attacks, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, and if you did not do that, then you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token, if you didn't put a card on the battlefield this way. So I think this is going to be pretty decent in Commander. Goblin red makes sense. Green is a little harder, but I still feel like it has a home somewhere. And I think this is got some value in it for Standard, but I'm not really sure where you'd put it. Maybe this goes in a Rafine deck. No, not Rafine, sorry. This goes in a Zayatora deck, maybe, where you have things that you want to sacrifice. And then I could see this in Limited as well. It's just really hard to pay for that, because in Limited, this is requiring 3 different mana colors and a generic. So, I'm sorry, 2 different colors, but it has a 3 devotion, so it's really hard. Next, we have Shana Purifying Blade, a 3 mana, 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue, 3/3 human warrior with lifelink in the beginning of your end step. You may pay X mana, and if you do that, you draw X cards. X cannot be greater than the amount of life that you gained on this turn. I feel like that limits it quite a bit, and it fits well in Commander because gaining more life is easy to do. In Standard, I don't think it's all that easy, so I do think this is harder to run in Standard. In Limited, 3/3 lifelink, even with the devotion requirement, is worthwhile to try to run. Next, we have Zulkanar, the Tainted. This is a 5 mana, 5/5 elemental demon, and at the beginning of your end step, you choose one that has not already been chosen. You draw a card, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. This deals 3 damage to up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker, or you exile this card and return it to the battlefield under an opponent's control. That makes it a very flavorful card. I don't know if anyone wants to run this in Standard, but and I don't know if it's good enough to run in Limited. Or when I say good enough, I should say it's hard to run this in Limited because people might be too nervous to run it in Limited. But I will say the most fun I see this card having will be in Commander, where some player has got to try to do something with this card. Even as a Commander, with those 3 different colors, that makes a pretty reasonable deck. Next is the Soul of Windgrace, a 4 mana, 5/4 cat avatar. So whenever he enters the battlefield or he attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. He has 3 different abilities. 1 blue mana, you discard a land and you gain 3 life. For 2 mana, 1 generic, 1 red, discard a land card, draw a card. For 3 mana, 2 generic, 1 black, discard a land card, and Soul of Windgrace gains indestructible until the end of the turn, but you have to tap him. And yeah, I think this is a good card all around. I could see this being a Commander. And I think, so for Commander, I could see this seeing some play there. In Standard, it's hard for me to say because land synergy is kind of weird with Standard. In Limited, it's also really hard just because of the color requirement for it, but I think that you're getting the right stat line for it, so. And the attack trigger is also nice. And the ETB is nice, so I think people will try. Then we have Tori Diavinant Fury Rider, a 4 mana, 3/3 human knight, has vigilance, has trample, and whenever it attacks, all of their attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until the end of the turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample until the end of the turn. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. Definitely a really good card for Commander. It fits Ishin colors, so I can see this going in Ishin's deck. In Standard, I think it's a good enough card to run. And in Limited, you absolutely want to try to run this card. And finally, for the multicolored, we have Zur, Eternal Schemer. A 3 mana, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1/4 human wizard with flying. Enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. For 2 mana, you can turn a non-aura enchantment you control into a creature in addition to its other types. its basic power and toughness being equal to its mana value. This is a pretty good card. I think this is okay in Commander. I think this card is harder to run in Standard, and in Limited you get the right stat line. It just would be nice if it had more power to it, but I think this card is good enough to run in Limited as well. But that does it for our multicolored cards. So next up, we'll talk about colorless cards, and then we'll also get into artifacts. So stay tuned for that, but until next time, later gamers!